My name is Angelina Hunt. I work as a civilian legal advisor at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado. My life is neat, structured, and quiet, the kind of order you learn to appreciate when you grow up in a family where every detail is tied to service and discipline. But when my mom called about Grandpa's 80th birthday, something inside me shifted. It had been years since I'd visited the old base in Texas where he used to live. I told myself it was just a family gathering, a simple celebration. Still, a part of me hesitated, as if the air around that memory carried unfinished business. Grandpa was a decorated Air Force pilot, the kind of man who wore his uniform like a second skin. Growing up, I'd sit beside him on the porch as he told stories about flying over dense jungles in Vietnam, about the sound of propellers that became part of his heartbeat. He wasn't dramatic about it, never exaggerated, just spoke with the quiet certainty of a man who had seen both beauty and destruction from 30,000 feet up. He always said flying gave him perspective, that from the sky, people's troubles looked small enough to manage. I used to believe that. The truth is, I owed much of who I am to him. My sense of fairness, my need for structure, even my love for the Air Force lifestyle came from watching how he carried himself long after retirement. But time had worn him down. The last time I saw him, his hands shook when he lifted his coffee, and his voice had lost some of its steady command. When Mom said he wanted everyone together again, I didn't question it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about cake and candles. The night before I left, I stood by my window in Colorado Springs, staring at the blinking lights of aircraft approaching the runway. Each one rose and fell in perfect rhythm, and for a moment, I thought about how predictable the sky seemed compared to people. Families, for instance, are far less stable. They can soar or crash without warning. I told myself I was overthinking, that this trip was about love and duty. But deep down, I knew something waited for me back in Texas. Something I hadn't prepared for. The Officers Club hadn't changed much since I was a kid. Same polished floors, same flight memorabilia on the walls, same heavy oak bar with its row of old brass plaques. But that night, something in the air felt off. The lighting was too dim, the laughter too rehearsed, and everyone looked just a little too polished, like they were playing roles rather than simply being themselves. I walked in expecting warmth. What I got was a performance. My parents greeted me first. My dad, crisp as ever in his retired master sergeant's jacket, gave me a tight smile. Mom looked like she'd stepped straight out of a recruiting ad from the 90s, hair done just right, not a crease in her dress. They hugged me like I'd been gone a decade instead of a year. At the center of the room sat Grandpa, thinner than I remembered, but with that same steel in his eyes. He gave me a smile that actually felt real, and for a second, I relaxed. Then came the introductions. Colonel Frank Mason, Grandpa's old wingman, stood up to shake my hand. He had the presence of a man used to commanding attention, his voice louder than necessary, his handshake firmer than comfortable. He toasted Grandpa with a speech about valor and legacy. It was the kind of tribute that felt rehearsed, like he'd given it before and would give it again, word for word. The guests clapped politely, glasses lifted, but the joy never reached their eyes. I noticed the room had more uniforms than usual. Not active duty, but retirees, VA representatives, and some base staff I didn't recognize. Then I saw him, Jordan Walker, clean cut, in civilian clothes, standing at the edge of the room with that OSI posture I knew too well. We hadn't spoken in over a year, not since he left without a word. Now he was here, watching me like I was a suspect. He waited until after the first round of toasts, before approaching me. We stepped outside onto the balcony, where the noise faded beneath the hum of the Texas night. He didn't waste time with small talk. His voice was low but sharp. "Angelina," he said, "you need to know something before this night goes any further." My chest tightened. "I'm not here for the party," he said. "This isn't a birthday. It's a covert financial op." At first, I thought he was joking, some twisted Jordan-style metaphor. But his eyes didn't flinch. He reached into his jacket and handed me a small folder. Inside were documents, copies of forged benefit forms, signatures I recognized. My heart sank. He explained that OSI had been building a case for over a year, a network of falsified VA claims tied to families with deep military roots. Someone had used Grandpa's service record and declining health to apply for backdated benefits under his name. The digital trail pointed to someone close. Too close. Your family is in the center of this, he said. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but the timing left me no choice. I felt my pulse in my throat. The man I once loved was accusing my own parents of federal fraud. And the worst part? He wasn't just saying it. He was investigating it. I looked back through the club's window. Mom laughed with someone near the dessert table. Dad was pouring drinks like nothing in the world could touch him. Grandpa sat quietly, as if he knew something none of us did. The party went on. The music played, and I stood outside, frozen between disbelief and a sinking sense that everything I believed about my family might be built on a lie. The hangar was quieter than I remembered. Grandpa used to call it his museum, a dusty steel shell packed with 30 years of flight manuals, service jackets, and handwritten logs. He'd kept everything from his days flying F-4 Phantoms to clippings from base newspapers with his name circled in red ink. It was always locked, but Jordan had already arranged for temporary access under OSI authority. He flicked on a flashlight and motioned for me to follow. Inside, the air smelled like old fuel and paper. Every shelf was stacked with boxes labeled in Grandpa's neat block handwriting. It didn't take long before we found the one marked Medical and Financial Post-Retirement. Jordan slid it to the floor and began sifting through the folders while I stood back, arms crossed, silently praying this was a waste of time, but I knew it wasn't. The first document he held up was a power of attorney form, supposedly signed by Grandpa 5 months ago. I froze. I'd seen my grandfather's signature enough times to know this wasn't it. The pen strokes were stiffer, the names slightly slanted like someone trying to mimic his writing but failing to get the rhythm right. Then came a bank transfer authorization, dated only a week later. Jordan pointed to the beneficiary's name, a trust fund account tied to a holding company in Austin. My mouth went dry. That company, he said, has connections to 4 other fraud cases we're tracking. I took the paper from his hand. The signature looked identical to the one before. There was even a doctor's note attached, claiming Grandpa had cognitive decline and needed assistance managing his assets. That note was digitally signed by someone at a medical clinic in San Antonio I'd never heard of. "What are you thinking?" Jordan asked quietly. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind raced through 100 memories, Mom fussing over Grandpa's pills, Dad managing his mail, both of them always hovering a little too closely these past few years. The timeline fit too perfectly. In the corner of the hangar, we found a locked file cabinet. Jordan picked it with a small tool he pulled from his jacket, like it was just another part of his job. Inside were printouts of email exchanges, most of them from a private account under my father's name. They discussed legal guardianship, banking access, and setting up out-of-state corporations. Some emails were copied to my mother. That hit harder than I expected. Jordan placed the stack in my hands. "They've been planning this for a while," he said, "and they've been careful." I didn't respond. The weight of the truth pressed down on my chest. I wanted to believe this was a mistake, a misunderstanding, but the evidence was too organized, too detailed. It wasn't a crime of desperation, it was a strategy. Looking around the hangar, I felt like a stranger in the one place that used to anchor me. The medals on the wall, the flight suit hanging neatly on a hook, the framed letter from the Air Force Chief of Staff, they all felt hollow now. Symbols of honor, in a room where deceit had been carefully hidden in plain sight. I glanced at Jordan. He didn't look smug or satisfied, just tired. He handed me a manila envelope already sealed. "This is going back with me," he said, "but you needed to see it first." I nodded, though my body felt numb. The worst part wasn't the fraud. It was the possibility that my parents, the people who raised me on discipline and integrity, had used Grandpa's name like a stolen password. I wasn't ready to confront them, but I couldn't pretend I didn't know anymore. We sat in the rental car parked just outside the hangar, the engine off, windows cracked. The silence between us stretched too long. I kept replaying what we had just found. But more than that, I kept replaying the look in Jordan's eyes when he handed me that first forged document. He hadn't flinched. Not once. I wanted to believe that meant he was sure, but it also meant he'd been holding this truth for longer than I realized. "I need to tell you something," he said finally, his voice low. He didn't look at me, just stared ahead at the chain-link fence as if it could answer for him. "The reason I left last year, the reason I cut off contact, it wasn't because I didn't care, it was because I got assigned to this case." I blinked. "You were investigating my family while we were together?" He nodded once, slowly. "It started small, a flagged form. Then, a series of irregular claims tied to multiple families with high-ranking military backgrounds. When your dad's name came up, I didn't say anything. I thought it would pass. But then your mom's email showed up in an audit, and it got deeper. By that point, I had to recuse myself from parts of the field work, but not before it affected everything between us." I turned to face him fully. "So you just ghosted me? You disappeared and let me believe it was something I did?" His jaw tightened. If I had stayed, I would have crossed lines I couldn't uncross. I didn't trust myself to separate personal from professional, and if I had told you the truth back then, OSI would have yanked me off the case. I needed to stay close to the investigation, even if it meant losing you. A bitter laugh escaped me, soft and sharp at once. "You chose the badge over me." "No," he said quickly. "I chose duty. I thought I could do both, but I couldn't. And the truth is, I never stopped thinking about you. But every time I looked at your face, all I could see was what I might have to destroy." I sat back, pressing my head into the seat. My thoughts ran in circles. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream that he had no right to come back now, no right to drop this on me and expect me to still see him as the man I once trusted. But the worst part was that I still did, because in that moment, sitting there with the files between us, surrounded by the truth neither of us wanted, he was the only one who hadn't lied to me. The only one who had told me something real, even if it broke us. He finally looked at me. "I know you feel like I betrayed you. I probably did. But I'm telling you now because what happens next could tear your whole family apart. And if there's any part of you that still believes in who I am, I need you to help me do this the right way." I didn't answer him. Not then. My hands were clenched in my lap, and my throat was tight. I didn't know if I could forgive him. I didn't know if I should, but I knew I couldn't go through this alone. And right now, the one person I wanted by my side was also the one who'd shattered my trust. The officers' club was louder this time. People moved from table to table with practiced smiles, glasses clinking under the soft yellow lights. A small band played a nostalgic swing tune near the back, but no one was dancing. The energy was forced, like everyone knew they were there to pretend. I sat beside Grandpa at the head table, watching my parents work the room like seasoned diplomats. Jordan stood near the back wall, eyes scanning everything, one hand on his phone. I hadn't told him I planned to confront them tonight, but I saw the flicker in his eyes when I nodded toward the stage. He knew what was coming. The microphone screeched once before my dad took the podium. He cleared his throat, made a joke about being just the guy who married into greatness, and introduced Grandpa with a reverent smile. Grandpa rose slowly, leaning on his cane, his voice soft but steady. He started talking about his first flight, about how the Air Force gave him purpose. Then he paused. His grip on the podium faltered, and he blinked hard, like he was trying to remember where he was. I stood up just as he swayed, then collapsed. Chairs screeched back. Gasps echoed. Someone shouted for a medic. I pushed through the crowd as two men in uniform rushed to Grandpa's side. He was breathing, but barely. His skin looked pale, and his eyes were unfocused. My mother grabbed my arm, telling me not to panic. It was probably just dehydration. "No," I said, pulling away. "It's not." I turned to my father. You've been drugging him, haven't you? He blinked, taken aback, then forced a chuckle. Angelina, what the hell are you talking about? Jordan stepped forward now, badge raised. Os. Everyone, stay where you are. The music stopped. Conversations froze. Uniformed security forces entered the room from the side entrance. It had all been rehearsed. And maybe it had. Jordan nodded to one of the officers, who approached my father with handcuffs already drawn. We have evidence linking you to the administration of low-dose benzodiazepines over several months, Jordan said. Designed to confuse. Just enough to secure guardianship and financial control. My mom's face drained of color. There's a mistake. You can't do this. But my dad didn't speak. He didn't argue. He didn't even flinch when they read him his rights. Grandpa was carried out on a stretcher. His eyes briefly locked with mine. There was no fear there. Only something that looked like regret. The guests whispered, some quietly slipping toward the exit. Others stared at me like I was the one who'd ruined everything. But all I could do was stand there, watching the life my parents built unravel in real time. After my dad was taken out, my mom turned to me. You don't understand what he was becoming. We did what we had to do. No, I said quietly. You did what was easy. And in that moment, I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a party guest. I was a witness. To the truth. To the consequences. To the people I loved. Choosing power over integrity. The music never came back on. The cake was never cut. And the celebration turned into a crime scene, dressed in ribbons and medals. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beep of the heart monitor and the low hum of the air vent above us. Grandpa lay still, his skin pale against the sharp white of the sheets, but his eyes were open, steady, clear in a way that calmed me more than any doctor ever could. I pulled the chair close and took his hand. He gave mine a gentle squeeze, and for a moment, we just sat in silence. No military formalities, no layered grief. Just two people who knew each other better than words could explain. They always think honor dies with the uniform, he said after a while, voice rough but sure. But the truth? It floats. No matter how deep they try to bury it, I'm squote. I swallowed hard, blinking fast. I never thought it would be them. I never imagined. He shook his head. Don't finish that sentence. We all think we know the people we love. But what matters is what you do when you finally see them for who they are. I looked down at my lap. In my bag were the last pieces of evidence. Signed transfers, recorded calls, proof that the people who raised me had taken advantage of a man too proud to admit he was slipping. If I stay quiet, I become part of it, I said. You already know the answer, he whispered. The question is whether you've got the stomach to live with it. His words weren't cruel. They were clear. I leaned forward, pressed my forehead lightly to his shoulder and nodded. Not because I wanted to do it, but because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. Later that afternoon, I walked into the OSI office with the files in hand. Jordan didn't say anything. He just opened the folder and got to work. I stood in the doorway for a second longer, watching him, feeling the weight of what I was choosing. My family name would never sound the same again. Holidays would feel hollow. But I would know. I would know I did the right thing. And in the quiet of that hospital room, with my grandfather's dignity intact, I realized something else. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs someone brave enough to let it rise. My name is Angelina Hunt, and I chose integrity over comfort. It wasn't easy. It cost me more than I ever expected. But I knew the truth deserved a voice. Even if it shattered everything familiar. There's a difference between protecting your family and protecting what's right. Sometimes, doing both just isn't possible. So let me ask you this. If you knew the truth could destroy your family's name, would you still speak it?